maybe after all this is over.
Sure.
Um, yeah, but I can get a venue. I can get a venue in Austin. My friend has a flat by Lee Barton Street, right by Terry
Okay.
Black's.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. That's a fantastic area, though.
yeah, it's an up and coming area, so we can probably do something private
Yeah,
there. I was thinking,
yeah,
because
yeah.
private dinners and private rooms in Austin just isn't a. I can't think of a place, right? I'm a member of Soho House, and they don't have a like a private area as well. So
Let me know. I live here, so I can help you. I mean, there are a few things we can do. Um, I live in Round Rock, which is about
oh,
far
cool.
away, and we can try to do some barbecue, whatever,
Okay,
if it's a manageable amount. So I'm happy to do that too. That's
cool.
no worries there.
Yeah, we'll arrange something. So, Nitin, we talked the last time. Quick intro. You're a blockchain advocate. I met you at SVB. Sorry, VC3 DAO in
That's
Puerto
true.
Rico conference. Then we
Yeah,
got roped into the SVB DAO
yeah,
thing. And then you are at State Street. You're a blockchain advocate. Generally, what I appreciated, actually, I don't know you well, but generally, what I appreciate during the Puerto Rico conference was your intimate relationship, but knowledge of the hedge fund side, the admin side, and the just an advocate on the institutional side of
yeah.
blockchain acceptance.
Yeah,
That
no, no,
fair description?
absolutely. I founded Blockchain Labs at IBM, and this was the institutional side, and build early days of, let's say, food safety and all the fringe use cases of blockchain. And while my focus was always been finance, spent a decade in building payment networks and understanding the capital markets and how blockchain can disrupt the capital markets. And while I was doing all this, I don't think you can escape many of the DeFi. And so our heads down, understand those protocols, both at technical level, but also because we were part of this sort of entity that was supporting the world's banks, were solicited for our opinion in terms of regulatory and compliance systems that needs to be built. Now I'm a global head of digital asset and technology design at State Street, which is one of the largest custody banks. It's institution of institutions. And one reason why I work there is to fully understand the financial systems from inside. And I think that many DeFi protocols don't even know what they're disrupting until you get to work for a true financial institutions to understand the existing systems and the deficiency and the strength of those systems. So that's sort of my remit. And again, working with the startup ecosystem community to understand the impact and the potential and the power of the things that we discussed, right? This is the DeFi and the DAOs, and how can the existing structure fit that model and take advantage of that model. So I'll pause here, talk to see if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think we were supposed to speak earlier, but obviously I think you had other pressing issues,
Yeah,
and then
today
I
was a crazy.
realized,
This whole week was a
yeah,
crazy week. Yeah,
yeah, it has been last 2 weeks. That's been crazy. Obviously the Wells notice. That's kind of the big kind of elephant in the room.
yeah,
So I literally just woke up. I'm calling from Austin. Sorry, Hong Kong. You're calling from Austin. I woke up and I was like, oh, and that's right around the time when we were supposed to speak. That's kind of realized. You want to do a quick update on Wells notice? What does it mean? What is it? Kind of quickly, what is it to the audience? And then maybe, yeah, what does it mean and why now?
yeah. So Wells notice generally is sort of a warning by SEC historically to say, hey, we will sort of go after you or sue you in this context of whether it's a violation of some rules or interpretation or regulatory sort of framework that they've laid out. And as you may have seen, they've done that in the past to many sort of crypto agencies, but also non-crypto agencies in general. That's the sort of their MO in terms of giving you a forewarning for you to be able to respond and give you an opportunity to be able to defend yourself and be ready for what's to come. And so I think today was something that happened to Coinbase. Coinbase, as you know, is the largest exchange. Amidst all that's happening in the ecosystem, I think in many cases, the interesting conversation was around the fact that they have violated certain security laws by listing unregistered securities. So
Mm,
in the U.S. context, of course, if you have a security which you can go into Howey's test is one of the tests that looks into what defines security. And if you're dealing with having a listing a security in exchange, then you have to go through a certain process. And if you're listing an unregistered security, which is the existing market structure, uh, that was the context of the Wells notice that was served to
Mm.
Coinbase. And Coinbase essentially came back and said,
Yes.
that we asked for reasonable crypto rules, and what we were served was with illegal threats instead. And that
Yes.
led to the entire conversation that's ensuing in this industry, per se.
And then that's the thing. So they came back. I saw the tweet storm. Let's see. Let's see. It was we've engaged in dialogue. We have. Let me just go to find his tweets. We've engaged in dialogue. We've actually, yeah, we've spent lots, I mean, countless, millions of dollars on legal fees and trying to talk and trying to be compliant. We'll continue to fight for the industry. I think that was kind of a
Yeah.
good marketing kind of message. But to that extent, is it just is it just kind of positioning?
No, 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 it's not. So if you look at some of the historical element of the industry, again, you've seen the Grayscale, from a DCG perspective, DCG, which was the parent company behind the Grayscale, which is trying to get this spot ETF approved, Bitcoin spot ETF, which has been a long conversation, which is now back in the courts in suing SEC to say, hey, not only you had procedural delays, but also, you've declined this consistently without giving us adequate sort of reasoning behind the decline. And so that ensues. That also was a part of this entire journey. And I think Coinbase and the industries come together to say, hey, we need clarity, we need structure. Otherwise, we are simply operating in dark, and we're constantly being threatened with these lawsuits.
Mm,
So primarily speaking, SEC's remit or SEC's sort of Wells notice was in context of a product. Oftentimes they go
right.
after activity and instruments, which is the two sort of framing. So Coinbase Earn, Coinbase Prime, and Coinbase Wallets are the
Right.
three sort of areas.
The
And
staking
Earn is
stuff.
staking stuff,
Right.
and Coinbase Prime is prime brokerage, and Coinbase Wallets are sort of the accounting systems. As you know, it's an account, and if you're allowing your clients to hold these securities, then you have to provide certain guardrails around it. But the
Mm,
question is, as we all have been debating, what is really a security in this complex crypto space? And that has not been defined yet either. They're still
mm,
using the 1930s sort of framework
mm.
in terms of what security is. And I think that is the sort of debate. I don't think it's just marketing. I just think that the industry is coming together now because post FTX and post tail end of 2022, is given the regulatory apparatus entire, adequate ammunition to go after all the crypto agencies or crypto entities that may have slight sort of eminence or in context of investor protection. I think that's the context here, is that they have the ammunition, they have the reason now with all these massive failures to
Mm.
now say, let's go and over-regulate the whole thing without giving enough thought to the thought leadership that's required from these agencies. I think
Got it. So it's cleanup basically.
it's a cleanup. Yeah,
It's a cleanup. It's a
yeah,
cleanup of some of the DeFi. Because if you take a look at this is right purely kind of DeFi staking, right? So it's cleanup of that. But then there's the other hand, which is this Justin Tron's Lindsay Lohan
yeah. That's right.
celebrities, right? So that's NFT marketing,
That's right. It's basically
right?
the advertising rules that you have, that if you advertise something, you have to have adequate disclosures in advertising. And that's true for most developed nations, including, US, UK, and some of the other areas to say, hey, when you advertise something around these financial instruments, you have to have
Right.
adequate disclosures. And if that's not the case, then that becomes illegal. So
Right. So I think that was so they're also not again. I'm just looking at the SEC. Justin Timberlake from illegal promoting his crypto assets. So I don't know if it were his tokens or his NFTs. So maybe are they making distinctions between the two, or are they just kind of broadly?
So one thing is, so again, activity in instruments, but then you also have other regulation in terms of when you advertise something, whether you're using celebrities or using plain, and this is something which FCA did in UK. When you travel the train system in UK, you'll find eToro's ad all over the maps,
Hmm.
and
Yes.
then there was a regulation in Europe in general to say, hey, when you place, first of all, some countries said you just can't place the ads because it's not ready for prime time. Some countries said you can place the ads as long as you tell them that there are risks associated with it.
Right.
And I think more recently, one of the European countries, and I can't think on top of my head is of my mind is that if you advertise, you have to have the statement that says there's nothing but risk with crypto as one of the qualifiers, which I thought was hilarious and funny.
It's just
I
like
think,
smoking. It's like, like
yeah,
in Hong Kong
that's right.
they've got like smoking cigarettes and they've got like guys with cancer. It's just like
That's
there's
right.
nothing
It's
but
on the
downside.
pack,
Yeah.
on the pack, and I think it was
Right.
France which just said that,
Yep.
hey, we're proposing this rule that every time you advertise crypto, you have to put this line to say there's nothing but risk in this financial instrument, which I just felt laughing around this whole thing. So there's that, but I think Justin
Hmm.
Chuan's was also market manipulation. That was the reason
Oh,
why they subpoenaed him, only because there was some uh, you know,
okay.
there were some tokens that were issued, and there were some supply of these tokens that was largely in his control, and they were doing a few things to pump and
Got it.
dump schemes. So they're
Got it.
going after those also now, which is
Got it.
legit in some cases, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, just reading the Bloomberg, the Reuters article, SEC charged with fraud, and then
Yeah,
Lindsay Lohan, $8 celebrities with illegal promotion. So that's
that's right.
marketing,
That's
and
right.
then market manipulation is Justin. Okay.
Correct.
Right.
But the thing about this SEC, this Coinbase is Coinbase has they're the least entity that we should be worried about, because one, they
Hmm.
provide an easy access. They are doing all the right things. It is a public company. So they've done everything historically, and I just think that in this entire FTX fiasco, a lot of these legit companies have been engulfed with
Hmm.
these enforcement actions, which I expect a bit more thought leadership from our regulators, and more than
Hmm.
regulators, I expect a bit more actions from our lawmakers. This is by the people for the people sort of narrative, for them to have much more meaningful clarity. Otherwise, Gary Gensler, SEC, he's a cop and he's enforcing the rules that he has in the books. There's little
Hmm.
you can blame him for that, right?
Yeah, I did. I did talk to. I was at a Bangkok Select USA. So it's an event hosted by the Commerce Department, and essentially trying to get startups to go to the U.S. And there was a former member of the Treasury there, and I did ask him, and we get him on the show at some point, and did ask him, "What do you think?" And he did say, like, it is in his view, it is a cleanup. Because I did talk to him about choke point, and obviously he doesn't know anything about choke
Yeah,
point, but he was kind of saying it's there was an egg on the face with FTX.
yeah,
Consumer protection is real, right? It is a real thing. I mean, they are concerned about that,
true.
and too many people have lost out, and so as a general cleanup under the purview of, again, consumer protection. Now, whether it's coordinated, whether there's a real strategy, maybe not. But it's trying to just do whatever they can right now at this point.
Yeah, I think in many cases for Coinbase, I think they were, it's basically FTX forced their hand to do these things only because,
Yeah.
kind of forced their hand. And I'll tell you this, you're absolutely right. There is a consumer protection theme to all of this stuff, because if you look at last year, $684 billion was wiped out from the entire, and it's a cyclical element when you begin to have these fraudulent activities. It leads to downward pressure on assets being sold, and the cycle continues when you consistently have drop in asset valuation because of these nefarious activities that happened in the industry. But 2 million people were affected with
Hmm.
the entire, a dozen plus different hacks that you have seen with bridging protocols and everything else. And uh, believe it or not, last year there weren't any, unlike the previous year, real attack on your wallets or hacks
Hmm.
on. And this is the weakest link hack. It was
Hmm.
really much more sophisticated hacks in DeFi protocols and market manipulation in those areas, which is what we've seen. And of course FTX lion's share, and 2 million people were affected, which I think is a consumer protection agenda, as you mentioned. So there's
Hmm.
certainly a lot of that, and that is valid. But I think in that entire clean sweep, a
Hmm.
lot of good projects and a lot of good people and a lot of good sort of entities also get impacted negatively.
Yeah, and I think
Which,
he was kind of insinuating that it's clean up now, and then worry about kind of the innovation roadmap
yeah,
and later on, right? So it got too far, and so it is a bit of a kind of going back. It's an equilibrium, equilibrimizing, if that can be a word. before worrying about that. And yeah, I think it was like innovation will come, right? The U.S. is always will always lead in terms of that, and I don't think, at least on the part of the government, that they worry too much about it. At least that's his thinking.
Yeah. But
Interesting.
you know, like what's interesting is that the timing of it is couldn't be worse in terms of
Yes, I was going to ask about that.
last
Yeah,
week we had a few banking failures. It had nothing to do with crypto.
right,
So it's not exactly like that system is super efficient, working as designed, so to speak.
right.
And then you have certain challenges now with, and so I think certainly this administration, which is, White House economic report came out today, scathing sort of, content in that around digital asset and crypto. So I would think that maybe the next administration will have some sea change around the thinking and around thought leadership, both in terms of regulation, but also in terms of sensible lawmaking that needs to happen in soliciting, American interest and, and public comment in terms of what they would like to see, because the bank failures and inflation and many of the other things we've seen with traditional finance is not helping either, right? So.
There was also the rate hike today. I mean, I just noticed that as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
which is interesting because they had
right,
2 trillion into a credit facility to help these banks who are, affected with this duration loan or interest rate risk to say, hey, we know your securities will mature a year from now, so let's put 2 trillion here so you can borrow and while we increase to tame the inflation. So while they want to tame the inflation, you're still pumping 2 trillion. I don't know if that really helps anything for that matter,
right.
you know?
It was what was the expected decision? Was he? I think it was no more rate hikes, right? I think that was
No, no, no.
the
They were expecting 50 basis points before
okay.
the banking system sort of begin to get affected, and that's due to the rate hikes. I'm sure
Right.
many people know that your rate hikes eats into asset valuation, and whatever treasury bills you had or coupons that you had to pay, the maturity um, you know was a year from now, and the valuation of these were not, if they had to liquidate these, you had to forego that coupon payment, for instance. So many of those were just as a result of these consistent excessive rate hikes and what we call as inversion control. The curves were inverted this way, which is the long-term bond and short-term bonds. They were not supposed to be where they are, and that is another challenge that the industry faced.
Where do you go from here? I know it's hard to predict, but is it? Yeah, what happens? What happens now
So I think I've always said this that you mean for crypto or for economics and economy in
for
general?
crypto? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm just looking
So I
at
think
Bitcoin has spiked as well, or continued to spike. Bitcoin price.
yeah, but the thing is, there are reasons for that, right? Maybe all the right reasons now. Maybe it's Balaji effect that people are buying stuff because Balaji
Thanks,
has
Balaji.
this
Yeah.
thought experiment around
Right.
where things are, or the fact that banks are failing, a combination of both, per
Right.
se. But I'll tell you, I wrote about this last time that I think crypto needs a market structure. Market structure means defined players and certain rules of engagement that is well understood. I also think that it needs an innovation narrative. So if you look into what has transpired in 2021 and what transpired in the last 6 months, this is more the same thing: more tokens, more NFTs, more projects, more PFPs, some incremental innovation. And if you noticed the merge, which happened in mid or towards the tail end of the mid year last year, that generated an amazing buzz where the entire crypto industry was uplifted because that was the innovation injection to say we are innovating this cool stuff, and that excited the entire community, and the entire crypto industry was lifted, and that lasted for some time, and then everything went back up again. And I just think that something like ordinals that happened in Bitcoin world, we need an innovation narrative. And even after 13 or 14 years now of Bitcoin inception, we haven't really solved the problems that Bitcoin aim to solve, besides becoming yet another speculative asset per se, is economic inclusion, truly solving for cross-border payments at lower cost. moving assets across the globe and creating sort of the egalitarian financial system, which is the intention reason why we all got into it, right? And the promise of working on those interesting challenges, interesting problems. I don't think crypto has solved that yet, and I just think that that innovation narrative needs to continue, and we need to focus on some sizable and seismic innovation that can really change not just the perception of the regulators and the lawmakers, but also a wider adoption from the masses. Because then you don't go back from Uber,
Right.
you don't go back from Lyft, you don't go back from the things that we are now is deemed convenient and widely adopted by the by the masses. I
Right.
think we need to aim for that. And so when we met in Puerto Rico, you saw a lot of projects who are aiming to making wallets easier
Right.
without aiming for permanent loss of assets. So these are sort of things that I think the industry should aim to achieve is wider, bigger adoption and solving for real problems, if that
Interesting.
makes sense.
It does, and I do think that's probably there's an element where, so right now the cleanup needs to happen. Probably everyone's on eggshells trying to figure out what they need to help out, or what they need to do. Build some time into it, and then I guess the projects, obviously the projects that are fine, or at least won't be speculative, or at least the projects that are speculative will drop out. It's too much risk. The
Yeah.
the projects that are fundamental, I think technology and innovation plays will continue, and hopefully those will aim kind of bigger, and it's about inclusion right into the industry
Yeah.
rather than just another speculative asset. To be honest, I'm pretty. I wouldn't say I'm happy, but I would say the last 2 years was incredibly too frothy.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
It was too
Just
frothy,
too
and,
frothy and too
and
many Me Too projects and with no really value add and more PFPs and more NFTs. And I always oftentimes question like, what are we, what are we doing in this space? And
yeah,
I'll tell you some of the example I give in traditional finance is if you had one ether and you could be in Vietnam, you could be in India, you could be in Uganda. The rules of engagements were exactly the same no matter where you are in the world,
right,
because that was a global financial system per se.
right,
You could access the same DeFi that me and you can access living in the United States and Hong Kong, for instance. And that was progress. And we should build upon that progress. We should build upon that progress in terms of enabling and not trying to change the laws of physics and laws of economics. You still need to
yes,
understand what's in demand, what's in not.
yeah,
And
that's
just
right.
because Axie Infinity became popular for 3 months or Steppen was popular, it lacked economic fundamentals and it fizzled out after the initial sort of uptake by the community, I think.
And it was incredibly too much hype, and I have a rant against GameFi. It was just the incentives don't make any sense, right? The
That's
more
right.
once there's a new game, the incentives go over there, and so there's no incentive other than making money, rather than have a
Yeah.
good time, right? Which is kind of what a game should be.
Yeah. And one thing I've written about this too, that crypto in general is meant to be participative asset, not a speculative asset. The entire idea of incentive
True.
economic systems of layer one or any of the layers are you participate with this asset and you monetize these assets. Uh, but 90% of these tokens are purely speculative tokens. No one's participating with them. That includes Bitcoin to a certain extent. Bitcoins are a store of value. People are holding on to it because it's
Yes.
storing this
Yes.
quantum of value in it. And I would like to see our perspective shift towards saying that I need to use this asset productively, just like we treat any other asset productively. Your cash, your investments, and your house, they have a productive utilization of these assets. So utility over speculation is should be the mantra for going forward, I think.
Great. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. I think
No
we'll just
worries.
end here. So
Okay.
cool. Thank you for your insights.
Hey, no worries. Take care, Tech.